How do I find a new job? How can I make a career change? And the biggest question of all, can I really find a career that I love? Hey, my name is Jen Smith, and I believe career success doesn't have to be at the expense of living a radiantly happy and healthy lifestyle. As a former HR leader and recruiter turned career coach, I get what companies are looking for when hiring top talent. What that means for you is an unmatched combination of insider knowledge and the best kept secrets about making heart-based career changes and navigating the ups and downs of job searching in today's world of work. Whether you're a recent graduate navigating the job market for the first time or a seasoned professional ready for a career change, this show is for you. So grab your coffee or your kombucha, pull up a seat, and get ready to be challenged and inspired to move beyond your self-doubt and take the right next steps towards landing a career you love. Because you deserve a long, radiantly happy and healthy career. This is the Flourish Careers Podcast. Hello and welcome back to the Flourish Careers Podcast. I'm your host, Jen Smith, and today I'm here with an episode dedicated to the power of taking tiny action for big results. So we are going to talk through the science behind tiny action, or what a lot of people call microsteps. We'll walk through a 3-step process that you can begin to think about today and wrap up with some recommendations for further study. So let me ask you this. Have you thought about changing your career, but felt completely overwhelmed by the enormity of the task? If so, you are not alone. We all have a variety of intentions and ambitions, but it can be really hard to find the motivation to get started when the end result just seems like this insurmountable feat. But sometimes the way forward isn't made in leaps and bounds. It's made one tiny, consistent step at a time. And that's where the power of tiny action or microsteps comes in. So microsteps are small, actionable steps that only take a few minutes to complete. Arianna Huffington is the founder of Thrive Global, one of my favorite organizations to follow, and they talk a lot about microsteps, and I'm a huge fan of this philosophy. And it's not just a practice I use with my beloved community, it's one I use myself. And I've used it, not even really realizing what I was doing, for every single career change or project, including designing my own business and creating this podcast. And every single time, it always works. So let's start with the science behind microsteps. So according to research, trying to make a big shift into a new career or a new lifestyle fails almost 90% of the time. And it's at the time of this recording, it's the new year. So there are a lot of people out there making resolutions and big ambitions and intentions for this year. And what happens is that those goals tend to be too big, and most people don't achieve them because they're too lofty or they're too vague and they just don't feel like they can achieve them. And this makes me think of a term from the corporate days. It just makes me cringe. Have you guys heard of the acronym BHAG? It stands for Big, Hairy, Audacious Goal. It's just so cringeworthy. But these big, vague goals or resolutions or BHAGs or whatever you want to call them are so daunting, we don't even know where to start. And that's completely demotivating. Don't get me wrong. I want you to have ambitions and I want you to dream big in your career, but I also want you to achieve those dreams. And it's the power of tiny action or microsteps that will help you achieve those dreams. Because what doesn't work is when we beat ourselves up for not having the willpower to achieve those big dreams. But guess what? It turns out that willpower is completely overrated. So studies have shown that you can't willpower your way into making a big change. Instead, willpower functions more like a muscle, and it has to be built up over time. And of course, sure, willpower can be a game changer, but to strengthen that muscle, you're going to have to work it out every single day. You'll hear big names like Oprah and Ariana Huffington who swear by the power of microsteps. And the concept is very simple. So instead of taking one big action, like starting a business or running a marathon, you're going to break it down into smaller, more achievable microsteps. So if your goal is to launch a business, you could break it down into tasks like maybe starting with a business plan or doing some competitive market research or talking to potential customers. Same thing if you are running a marathon. You're probably going to start by running a mile or two. You're not going to just jump in and run the entire marathon. So no matter how small your tiny actions get, it's the act of doing them that's going to keep you motivated and on track. In fact, many of the experts who are out there in this world argue that when it comes to microsteps, the smaller, the better. So according to Dr. Fogg, who is a behavior change researcher at Stanford University, the key to microstepping success lies in making the minimum viable effort. So going as small as you possibly can. He says, make it tiny, even ridiculous. A good tiny behavior is easy to do and it's fast. Even just 5 minutes will make a difference. And the evidence is all around us. So with the right strategies and mindset, you can achieve anything. All you have to do is figure out what tiny actions you need to take and then follow through to accomplish any of these big goals. So with that, I want to walk through a 3-step process with a couple of examples that you could follow. So step number 1 is to break it down. So take that big goal and break it into small, tiny, digestible, manageable tasks. And the trick is to find out which microsteps will help you reach your goals and keep you motivated. So you literally want to make a list. So I'm a huge notebook nerd. I love notebooks. I love pens. So I would love to just ask you to grab a new notebook and your favorite pen and start making a list of all the tiny actions that will help you get to your larger goal. The more tiny actions you can think of, the better. So for example, if your goal this year is to make a heart-based career change, you could start to break it down into tiny tasks like, so for example, start to seek out thought leaders in the industry that you're interested in and follow them on social media. You could leverage LinkedIn to find individuals who do the type of job that you want to do and just take a peek at their profiles, learn about their career paths. You could set up a coffee chat with someone who works at a company that you're interested in. You could read an article about your ideal industry and the challenges and the aspirations that that industry has. Listen to an audiobook or a podcast about a new topic that you're interested in. Ask your friends or colleagues about companies they've loved working for and why. Maybe spend a few minutes refreshing your LinkedIn profile or dust off the old resume or look up an article on how to write a letter of intent. So any of these smaller tasks will help you move forward and give you the momentum for your career change or making a job change. So step 1, like I said, is to break it down into all those tasks. And you could just do like a total brain dump. Just get all of your ideas out of your head. Doesn't matter what they are, just get them all out of your head and onto paper. That'll give you a place to start. Step number 2 is making the commitment. So taking small steps towards your goal is a commitment. You must focus. And I always suggest, because I know people are busy and have a lot going on. So just focus on one tiny action each day. So that list that I just shared with you, you're not going to do that all in one day. Maybe one day you read an article about an industry challenge, and the next day you spend a few minutes looking on LinkedIn to see the different types of roles at one of your ideal companies. So you do one of these tiny things each day. I recommend committing and doing these things when you're at your best. So if you're a morning person like me, spend a few minutes each morning. If you're a night owl, that's great. Do it in the evening. Think about your wait time. So a lot of times I talk to folks and they, get this idea and it's just super daunting and they start breaking it down and then they say, "Oh, I just don't have enough time." So you have to commit to it. You have to make the time. So think about your wait times. Maybe you have a commute and you could listen to a podcast in the car. Or if you take a train, you could do some research and reading while you're on the train. If you're waiting for an appointment, print out an article or tag it on your phone and read it while you're waiting for your appointment to start. I do that all the time. You could also, if you're motivated by tracking your progress, find a habit tracker. Check off the boxes or find a digital habit tracker that'll give you a notification. So you ensure you're maintaining that consistency, which is super important. And we're going to talk about consistency in a minute. So step number 1 is to break down your goal into smaller actions. Step number 2 is to commit and make the time. Find the time to commit to making your change happen. Step number 3 is to celebrate your wins. So according to Harvard researchers, each time you reach a mini milestone, you are more likely to receive a dose of dopamine. And progress and the power of progress is fundamental to human nature. So for most of us, that intrinsic reward is enough to keep us motivated. But if you feel the need for an outside or an extrinsic reward to keep yourself motivated, go for it. Give yourself the rewards and that dose of dopamine to celebrate your successes, no matter how small they are. So Christine Arylo is an author and somebody that I love her work. And she talks about achievers' amnesia and how quickly, as high achievers, we forget about the things that we've done. And so it's so critical to pause and celebrate. And who doesn't love to celebrate? This is going to help you keep moving forward. I do this at the end of each week. I do like a weekly wrap-up ritual. And part of that is to create an I did it list. So this helps me remember my accomplishments, which is motivating for me to continue to move forward. It helps me plan for the following week. And it's a really fun way to close out the week. And then I make it a point to celebrate. It doesn't have to be anything big. I just pick one little thing and, have a quick cheers or a little celebration to recognize the achievement and to celebrate the wins. So I want to be clear here that consistency is a big part of successful microstepping. It's the consistency that is scientifically proven to yield the big results in the long run. So if you go back to that example of running a marathon, if you run 1 mile each month, it's probably not going to prepare you for running that marathon. But if you commit to running a mile each day, that, on the other hand, is going to prepare you for the long run or the big goal of running the marathon. So Microsteps simply aid you in helping you to remain consistent. So with the right approach, you can make progress towards those goals without having to spend hours and hours on them. And you can start with 5 minutes. So prioritizing your well-being and making a career change can be super hard. But just committing to 5 minutes is totally doable. And 5 minutes to flourish is a time management hack that many of my beloved community members have used to gain momentum when making their career changes. And it's super easy. So I'm going to walk you through how this works. All you have to do is set a timer on your phone for 5 minutes. and focus on performing one microstep or tiny action for 5 minutes. When the timer goes off, decide if you want to keep going for another 5 minutes. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't, or maybe you can't. Something else comes up and you have to move on. But no matter what you decide to do next, acknowledge that you did that one small thing for your future self and thank yourself for that. And guess what? All of those 5 minutes are going to add up over time. And before you know it, you're well into accomplishing that big, scary goal. I actually do this all the time with exercise, pretty much every single day. So I tell myself that I'm going to do some type of exercise for 10 minutes. So I have a Peloton. I love it, but I still struggle with just getting the motivation to get on the bike. So I say, okay, I'm just going to do a 10-minute ride. Then I get on there, I do 10 minutes and it's fun. And so I'm like, okay, let me add another 10-minute ride. Or maybe I'll do a 15-minute or a 10-minute yoga practice. So committing to that a few times a week is really helpful for me. And I always tell myself it's just 10 minutes. And now I'm actually on, I don't know, something like a 125-week streak of getting on that Peloton. And the best part is I always feel better after I do it. I know that it's good for me. Another example is how I started this podcast. So if you would have asked me to host a podcast a year ago, I would have run the other way. I had no idea what to do. The software was completely daunting. The time commitment felt like a lot. The thought of recording my ideas felt vulnerable, and frankly, it still does. All of this was completely unknown. So I started small. I said yes to a couple invitations to be a guest on a show. I co-hosted a handful of episodes for another show. I signed up for a podcasting course and I committed to completing one module a day until I felt comfortable with the process. And then I set up some meetings to chat with others who have been successful with podcasting. And now here we are into season 2. So it was the tiny and consistent action that got us here. So the bottom line is that the power of tiny action for big results is the real deal. And it's totally within your reach. So activating the power of tiny action or microsteps is a great way to achieve your heart-based career goals and realize your full potential. So as a recap, the concept is simple. So instead of taking one big action like starting a business or running a marathon or making a career change, you're going to break it down into smaller, more achievable, bite-sized microsteps. And the 3-step process is to break it down, like I just said, figure out which microsteps will help you reach your goals and that will keep you motivated, and make a list. Then make a commitment. Start small, 5 minutes a day on one microstep when you're feeling at your best. And then, of course, celebrate each and every micro win. Each time you reach one of those mini milestones, you are going to receive a big dose of dopamine, and it's going to help you get the momentum to move forward. So give yourself rewards, celebrate your successes, no matter how small. And then, of course, consistency is the most important part. 5 minutes a day. You can find 5 minutes a day to put towards you and your career goals. So if you'd like to read more about the science and the power behind microsteps, here are the books I rave about and recommend the most often. I'm going to add these to the show notes. So the first one is Your Time to Thrive by Marina Kittikel. And this is pretty much the microstep Bible. So in this book, she advocates for making your microstep, quote unquote, too small to fail. And there's tons of science and anecdotes to back up her claims. So I highly recommend that one. The other one is called One Small Step Can Change Your Life by Robert Marr. And this book goes into our brain's built-in resistance to new behaviors and why we procrastinate. So it talks about more like the psychology behind microstepping. And then the third book I recommend is Tiny Habits by Dr. BJ Fogg. So it's packed with easy to read information, charts, real life example, examples. And I would say that this book is for the diehard microstep nerds like me. So I hope that you found this helpful and a little motivating to help you achieve your career goals for this year. So that's all for today. And if you found this helpful, I would love for you to share it with a friend. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will talk to you next week.